today's video, I want to go over a case study for a client of mine. Now, I changed the name and everything, but this is a couple who lives in California. They're in their mid and early 50s. They have children, and they're wanting to know whether or not early retirement is possible. And specifically, they've saved about $3.5 million. They have a rental property, and they'd like to know realistically what is their spending capacity, how much can they afford to consistently spend, and have the type of lifestyle they want without running out of money and without having to go back to work. So let's take a look at the numbers, see how the numbers shake out, and see what we can learn from their experience. All right, so first let's take a look at Jordan and Susie's resources. Again, made up name, but based on a real client's experience. So the first thing when looking at capacity for spending in retirement, especially early retirement, is we're gonna look at the resources that you have. So what do you have in investments? What do you have in savings? And then also income sources. Do you have rental properties? What are your projected Social Security benefits? That sort of thing. So looking at Jordan and Susie, they have about $3.5 million right now. And that's broken down. They have some money in a trust account along with some extra cash that they've been building up. They both have Roth IRA accounts, but as far as the overall household portfolio, it's on the smaller side. Now, like I mentioned, they have two children that are still minors, and they want to make sure that they have money set aside for them to be able to go to a four-year university. And so they've been saving money in 529 plans. So we'll take that into account. And then both of them have about $700,000 in 401k plans from when they were working. We can see their overall kind of investment mix, and right now they're set up in kind of a very basic 60-40 portfolio, 60% stocks, 40% bonds. Now, that's how they're set up today, and it's probably going to make sense for us to adjust that, but this is a starting point to see what is their capacity. The next thing that I want to look at is the overall tax allocation of the client. So they've got all these investments, but like you probably are aware, depending on the type of account that your investments are in, that will impact the way that those dollars are taxed once the money is taken out of the account, or even how the money will be taxed while it's still in the account. So looking at the breakdown, they have a really good mix for an early retiree client or for a prospective early retiree. So they have actually just over half of their money is invested in what are called taxable accounts, which basically means these are accounts that somebody could get into, sell investments, pull cash out without incurring early withdrawal penalties. Those would apply to things like a 401k or a 403b or an IRA account. They have some of those, but importantly for an early retiree, one of the major issues is providing cash flow from the time that you retire until you reach that important age of 59 and a half, when you no longer would be subject to those early withdrawal penalties. So there's some exceptions around that, but that's kind of the general rule. Now with the Roth IRA accounts, they have that makes up a small percentage of their overall portfolio. So overall, they're in a good situation. Now looking at their income, when we started putting this plan together, Jordan and Susie were pretty specific. They were able to go through all of their spending and what they thought they would want as far as lifestyle once they retired. I mean, they want to be able to travel. They're going to need to stay where they're currently living because they want both of their children, who are teenagers right now, they want them to be able to finish school with their friends where they're currently at. But they do want to be able to travel, and so taking into account everything they'd like to do in their lifestyle, they figure that they need about a little over $8,000 a month. But after looking at all of their resources, as well as other income sources like the rental property that they have, they could actually have almost $13,000 a month of net spending. That's after taxes. So interesting, this retiree, even though they're 56 and 52 at the moment, they're able to actually spend about $4,000 more per month than what basically they've planned for. So with all of this extra flexibility, this gives this family a lot of options about things that they can do to maybe save taxes over the long term, or even reimagine their early retirement and consider doing things that they had not even considered doing before. That's one of the main things that happens with somebody who is either somebody who's about to retire, is they kind of think about the lifestyle they'd like to have, and their ideas about what they could do are very much anchored to what they've already experienced in life, or what they think they can do based off of their financial resources. But it's very difficult to project or predict how much you can really spend based on your investments and income sources without having a sophisticated planning tool to take everything into consideration. And so people will make plans that what I've seen most of the time kind of underestimate what somebody can actually do. So in this client's case, their plans were about $8,000 a month. Once they see that they have the capacity, they could spend quite a bit more than that. That's probably going to influence their plans and how they might adjust what they've considered doing in the first place. Now on this chart, what we're looking at is a long timeline from today until Jordan and Suze are both like 100 years old, to see how their spending is, how we're planning for it to adjust over time. And then also this gives us a clear look at the changes that are going to happen in their income sources. So this is particularly relevant for an early retiree who is going to have maybe a very long time before they are eligible to take Social Security or pensions they might have earned, that sort of thing. So starting today, you can see that the majority, if we look at this purple area here, this represents the monthly income amount they're going to be taking from their portfolio. Now, and then below that, this dark blue, this represents their rental property that they'll be able to get income from as well. Now, looking at this number, you see that it's over $16,000, which is larger than the number we were looking at just a moment ago, looking at their total income that they could have per month, their spending capacity. And that's because this is taken into account some extra taxes that they will need to account for because of some tax strategies that we are going to implement with these retirees. So I'll get into that in a second, but for now, just looking at the sources of income and how that's kind of changing over time. So in the beginning of retirement, it's coming mostly from the portfolio and a little bit from the rental properties. As we go along, you can see here in about 2028, we have this little pop-up that happens. And this is when their son and then their daughter are going to be heading off to school. And so, we don't know exactly how much that's going to cost, but we have projected that into the plan and made sure that by, Jordan and Susie retiring when they do, they're not going to jeopardize their ability to help their kids with college expenses, which is something that's very important to them. So you can see that as one goes to school, it pops up. And then as they're both in school, those go up quite a bit and it drops down. Now, once we get out to this point here, you can see that we have the first benefit, Jordan's Social Security benefit kicks in. A few years later, Susie's Social Security benefit will kick in. And for this plan, I have both of them claiming their Social Security at age 70. And that's after running various scenarios about what would be the most efficient way to do this. That was the way for them to get the most projected benefit out of the Social Security system. One of the things that I notice a lot with early retirees is that they would like to run their plan assuming no Social Security income. Of course, we can run those scenarios, but I would say as a baseline, it makes sense to run a plan assuming those benefits. So now as you go along, you can see that the dollars they're going to be taking out are going up over time, and but then the rate of increase slows down, and then towards the end, you can see an increase in monthly spending. The reason for that is that research shows that, and I've kind of seen this, in my own experience working with retirees once you get kind of further into retirement, is that as you get older, spending tends to kind of drop down, and then near the end of life, it'll typically kind of spike up with medical expenses or other expenses for end of care. Now, with someone retiring as early as Jordan and Susie, that drop in spending is not going to happen for a long time, just because of how old they are, and they still have teenagers, and so that spending is definitely on an upward trajectory for a couple decades before it starts to taper off. Now, once we have a retiree's core plan put together, which is basically looking at, whether or not retirement is even feasible, looking at the resources, their planned expenses, income sources, and, is it gonna work? Before we can get creative with tax strategies and health insurance planning, all of these things, we first need to determine whether it's even realistic. So now that we've done that, it's absolutely realistic for this client. Let's look at ways that they can optimize their situation and save on taxes. So with this client, the first thing that we did is we had to look at tax planning with a constraint of health insurance. So with a client who's retiring before age 65, one of the strategies you have to consider is how to affordably pay for health insurance. And so you might be aware that through the Affordable Care Act, it's possible to qualify for subsidies, or in other words, having the government cover part of your health insurance expenses if your income is below certain thresholds. Now, with Jordan and Susie, they have 2 teenage children, so health insurance expenses, it's not just them, but it's also their children, and so managing for this is very important. Looking at various tax strategies, if we didn't have to consider health insurance, we probably would have recommended another approach. But because there was a health insurance expense, we needed to plan to keep their income below a certain threshold. And so what we're looking at on the screen right now is comparing 2 strategies. In the yellow, this is the baseline strategy. So what I call this is what somebody would do if they were they had some knowledge about retirement accounts and how things are taxed, but they didn't have any knowledge about kind of advanced strategies that are available. So in this yellow strategy, what we can see here, this is showing the tax brackets that they would have been in by taking money first out of their taxable accounts, then tapping into tax-free accounts like their Roth balances, and then finally tapping into their deferred accounts like 401k, IRA balances. The other scenario is saying, what if instead they were to do some Roth conversions, which is shifting money from their 401ks over into IRAs, over into Roth IRAs. What this does is it means they're going to pay more taxes in these first several years, with obviously, the hope that later on down the road this is going to result in significant tax savings. So before you do a strategy or even think about starting to do this, it's important to look at, okay, if I'm going to go out of my way to pay extra taxes in the early years, what is the potential benefit? Is there any, or is it even, are we just getting excited about strategies without really knowing whether or not there's going to be a high likelihood of those benefiting us? So with the Roth conversion strategies, you can see here that for the first several years, this client is going to be intentionally paying up into the 15% tax bracket instead of where they could be, which is the 10% bracket. And as we go along, you can see that eventually, after Social Security kicks in, once we get to the point where required minimum distributions kick in, you can see that this is where the real tax savings come into play. So these yellow bars are showing that once RMDs kick in, they're going to be paying a lot more. They're going to be in a much higher tax bracket. So let's look at this in terms of kind of just the raw numbers side to side. What is the comparison? So by doing a 12% bracket management approach with Roth conversions, it'll mean they pay more in the beginning years. However, they're still going to be able to qualify for those important health insurance tax credits. And overall, they're going to save about 10% overall in their average tax bracket rate. And you can see these savings are just, they're significant. About $3.5 million in taxes total, income significantly higher, and then net legacy, the amount that's going to be available to their children or whoever they pass their funds on to, it's going to be a lot higher. Now, I recently was doing some planning with another client, and when we looked at a similar situation with them, one of the things that was a major driver of their decision with taxes, with the tax approach that they ultimately chose, was the expected break even. So looking at the other numbers, you could see, wow, if they do this Roth conversion strategy, they're going to save about 10% overall in their tax bracket in retirement, save millions of dollars, all these projections, right? But how long are they going to have to live in order to, actually benefit from those savings? With this client, you can see that break even between the blue and the yellow doesn't happen clear out until 2050s. So now, for these clients, they're going to have to consider, is it worth it to pay extra in taxes all of these years to save that much in taxes? Is it worth it knowing that I'm going to have to wait, over 25 years in order to, get those gains? You can see that the real difference in the tax numbers don't happen until the later end of the plan. So this doesn't mean yes or no, but this is something to consider as you're looking at your tax strategy. Also, always a consideration is the just us being very realistic about the fact that as tax laws change and policies change, that a retiree is going to have to re-examine their tax strategy multiple times throughout retirement. So this gives us I think this is helpful to inform a retiree with kind of a North Star of kind of the general direction they're going to be going in, but knowing that there's still going to be the need for flexibility and to make adjustments along the way, based on changes in tax law, tax policy, and just life situations. Okay, so now for our retiree, now that we've looked at the core income plan, we've looked at their tax strategies, I like to look at, on a year-by-year basis, where's all the money going? We've got Roth conversions happening, there's taxes that are being paid, we have to pay for college, we have to pull money out of the portfolio in order to just like live on. So with everything happening, where's the money coming from? So right here, with our clients, we're looking at a timeline of their retirement. So we can look at, okay, when are different expenses going to kick in, when is Social Security going to kick in, and everything. So at first, looking at their expenses, their baseline expenses, remember, they wanted a little over $8,000 a month. So you can see here, okay, we have those baseline expenses. And then because of the Roth conversions that they're going to be doing, we have to plan on quite a bit being pulled out to cover taxes. Now, from income sources, we have other income in the beginning, and this is from their rental property. From the portfolio, about $259,000 is coming out, and we can break it down and see kind of where is that coming from. So from their cash and their trust account, their taxable money, we've got about, let's see here, about $175,000 is coming from there. Then we have $42,000 coming out of Jordan's 401k, and another $42,000 coming out of Susie's 401k. And that's because if we look over here, plan, saving, and transfers, we are making a $84,000 Roth conversion in this first year. And so another part of this is it's going to be more effective from a tax standpoint to pay the Roth conversion bill out of the taxable account. And so that's why we're having to pull more money out of the trust in order to cover the tax bill for the Roth conversion so that we can take that full $84,000 and convert it into the Roth IRA. So you can see in year one where the flows are going from. And as we go along here, you can see how this adjusts over time. So in year two, the same thing, year three, year four, year five, and you can see that this is the first year that their kids are going to start, or we're planning on them to start school. And now all of a sudden, we can see the sources where money is coming from. It's still about the same plan year by year. About $175,000 is coming out of the taxable accounts. About $82,000 is coming out of the 401ks for Roth conversions. And then now, out of the two 529 plans, we're now doing transfers out of those accounts to cover the kids' college expenses. Now, along the way, you may have noticed that the baseline expenses are going up over time, and that's just to account for things like, cost of living, things getting more expensive, airline tickets getting more expensive as the years go by. Now here we're looking at the retiree spending from a kind of a different visualization. So if we were to imagine a river flowing and imagining that water flowing as dollars coming out of their investment accounts from their income sources, and where are they going? Where are those dollars being allocated? Where are they flowing to? So from here we can kind of visualize what that actually looks like. So you can see that we have money coming out of the trust account. We have money as well coming out of the two 401k accounts, this extra cash reserve account, and then also we have rental income that's coming in. And we're looking at the first year of their retirement. So now as we look at where are those various income and assets flowing. So at the top here, this purple, you can see that $84,000 is flowing through, and this is going to those Roth conversions that we already talked about. Now from the portfolio, there is about $143,000 that's going towards expenses. We look at what expenses are those. Well, we have the baseline expenses. This is just like the their monthly living expenses, travel, food, that sort of thing, and then the $43,000 of the taxes, which are going to cover the taxes that are generated from this baseline income, as well as paying for the taxes on these Roth conversions. You can see here that from the plan, there's a surplus of about $54,000 they could have spent. And this is really important with a retirement plan. How much flexibility is there in the plan? If you needed to spend extra in any given year, or you just wanted to spend extra, is there capacity in the plan in order to do that? And like I talked about, if this number is significant, it might change. You might end up changing your plans for retirement based off of this number. Maybe it allows you to look at retiring sooner than you would have, or maybe it allows you to look at increasing your monthly living expense, or spending, or other plans to better use this surplus income. One of the risks for people who've saved very diligently for retirement is that they are used to living far below their means, and they've done that for so long in order to save and invest. And then once they've retired, it's very difficult to kind of flip over, make that change into spending. And so looking at these numbers can help somebody to avoid the risk of underspending once they're in retirement. Now, the last thing that I want to look at for this plan is, now that we have this plan, mapped out from all the way from now until these people are like 100 years old, how are they going to manage this on a go-forward basis? How do they know if they need to adjust their income, that sort of thing? And so the approach that I think is best for doing this is called a guardrail approach. With a guardrail approach, it gives you some guidance as far as your current target income, how much can you spend, and then it tells us if the portfolio goes above a certain level, this then gives us permission to increase spending above even planned cost of living adjustments, and know that we're doing that in a responsible way. On the other side, it gives us guidance for whether the portfolio drops below a certain level, if we need to look at spending less from the portfolio in order to maintain the long-term strength of the plan. So with this retiree, you can see that in the beginning their portfolio is about $3.5 million. And first, let's look at this lower guardrail. So what this is saying is that their spending, if their portfolio were to drop about 25% down to $2.6 million, correspondingly, they would need to reduce their spending from $16,500. Now remember, this is the gross spending amount. So even though their spending for their own needs they could do about $12,000 a month, this is higher to cover those taxes on the Roth conversion. But at any rate, they would need to reduce their spending by about 5%, or about $800 a month. Interesting here that with this client, even under a situation where their portfolio drops 25%, at this point, having spending $15,700, this is still far and away higher than what they were planning, or what they need to spend, or what they would like to spend on a monthly basis. Now let's look at the flip side. This is harder to consider and kind of conceptualize. It's easier to think about, or I should say most of us think about kind of worst case scenarios. What if things go wrong? How are we going to address that? So we've covered that. What if things go better than expected? So for this retiree, 3.5 million, if their portfolio were to go up by about 10%, correspondingly, they'd be able to increase their spending above cost of living adjustments by about 10%. So going up from 16,500 up to 18,100. So you can see kind of the, for this retiree, it takes a very large decrease in the portfolio to require a drop in income. On the flip side, it requires a very small increase in the portfolio to permit an increase in income. And that really speaks to, for this retiree, how conservative their plan is relative to the resources that they have saved and prepared for early retirement. All right, so that's everything for today. We've looked at a great case study for Jordan and Susie. Again, made-up household as far as their names, but based off of the experience of real clients. And hopefully this is giving you some insight into the possibilities for retirement income for somebody who's in their mid-50s with children who still need to go to college and have saved about $3.5 million. Now, obviously, this is not investment or retirement advice, but this is hopefully some good education and perspective for what might be possible with some helpful planning. So until next time, stay positive so you can retire early, retire strong. I'll see you later.